So welcome everybody. We're ready for chapter 6, and I didn't mention, but I wanted to mention the aluminum Christmas tree that we've learned in the previous chapter. Kat, we had an aluminum Christmas tree. My family had an aluminum Christmas tree.
Yeah, my grandma actually had one. Yeah. I thought it was so cool. I would just sit there and stare at it for hours.
I was probably more weird than you. I literally laid on the floor like I was a Christmas package with my head stuck under the tree, looking up and watching the colors change.
Okay, yeah, you're weirder than me.
Yeah, I am, I'll tell you. Well, here's one thing. By doing these little vid pods with everybody, they're not only going to get a book, but they're going to get to know you and me pretty darn well.
Probably more information than they really want.
TMI, right? TMI. So let's get into into chapter 6 now, and we're going to get a little further, and then we'll come back on the backside of this and share some more personal information and insight with you. So here we go. Chapter 6. Chapter 6. Granny put the receiver in the cradle and went back to the dining room. Pearline is coming over. She says she has a little something to bring by and was going to come tomorrow, but with the bad weather on the way, she wants to come tonight. She'll be here shortly. Should I set another place at the table? Asked Nellie. No, I don't think she'll be here before we finish dinner. It will be great to catch up. I wasn't able to see Pearline the last time I was here, said Mrs. Albright. Doug nudged Alan and whispered, Beehive Beasley. Or more like buzzing bee, said Alan under his breath. They both started snickering. What was that? Mrs. Albright asked. Nothing, Doug said, scooping up a bite of Jell-O, trying to be evasive. You will use your manners, Douglas. Do you understand? Pearline is a wonderful person, and I'll not have any of you making fun of her, Mrs. Albright reminded them. Pearline Beasley and Maggie started first grade together and had been inseparable until they graduated from high school. When Maggie went off to college, Pearline went to beauty school. She came back to Cordelia and opened her own beauty shop called the Cut and Curl. She had married a fellow by the name of Clark Bean. That's when everyone started calling her Miss B, since both her maiden name and her married name started the same way. The marriage didn't last very long, so Pearline went back to using her maiden name. Still, most folks nowadays just called her Miss B. Being in the beauty business, Pearline kept up on all the latest fashion trends. Much of the conversations in the beauty shop revolved around the latest articles in Cosmopolitan and Mademoiselle. She herself had a mile-high beehive hairdo swarming around on the top of her head. She was platinum blonde, but not really. She had been blonde for so long, nobody knew the natural color of her hair. Pearline was also tall, and each year she grew a bit heavier in the hips. She most often wore ruffly, blousy tops made from sheer floral fabrics that wafted and fluttered when she moved about. She thought they made her look dainty, like a butterfly, but butterfly was not a word anyone ever used to describe Pearline. Fortunately for everyone, the back doorbell didn't ring until the dinner dishes were being dried and stacked. Douglas, would you answer the door, please? Asked Granny. Hello, Miss B, Doug said as he opened the door. Douglas Albright! Goodness gracious! You're a full-grown man. Let me look at you. She set a casserole dish on the counter next to the door. Come here. She grabbed his face with both hands and gave him a kiss on his forehead. And you're shaving, Pearline said when she felt the soft stubble on his cheeks. Doug was cringing on the inside and trying very hard not to let it show. He was so relieved when she let go and turned to Lizzy. Lizzy! Pearline took a hold of Lizzie's face too, giving her a kiss, and then ran her fingers up through her hair. Do you know how many people I know who would kill for this fabulous red hair? Thank you, Miss B, Lizzy said politely. Alan, who wanted to avoid the same fate, had quickly grabbed a towel and started drying dishes. But he didn't escape. Pearline still managed to fawn over him, too. She made the rounds and greeted everyone with the same effervescence. "Thank you all for allowing me to crash your party. I brought this egg casserole for your breakfast tomorrow. It's called Southwestern Surprise." "Pearline, you certainly didn't need to do that, but thank you very much," said Granny. While Pearline had many memorable characteristics, it was her unmistakable way of speaking that stood out the most. When she was a young girl, she had a rather significant speech impediment. Working with a speech therapist during those younger years, her entire way of speaking became significantly affected. She was keenly self-conscious about it and tried to make up for it by elongating her vowels and pitching them up and down, almost as if she were singing. Her hardest challenge had been her S's. She learned that if she softened each S, it wouldn't whistle, but by doing so, each S sounded more like a Z. "Do you have time to catch up a bit, Pearline?" asked Mrs. Albright. "I would love to," she replied, "but let's keep an eye on the weather. If it starts to sleet or snow, I want to leave right away, before the roads get slick. Let's go to the solarium. It will give us some privacy." As the two headed down the hall, Mrs. Albright said, "Get ready for this. You're not going to believe your eyes." Pearline saw Granny's aluminum tree and squealed. The evening was winding down. Mr. Albright had his mind set on a project that had been bugging him for a while. He went to the garage to look for tools. Nellie turned to Esther and said, "Once I'm done here in the kitchen, I think I'll make my way to my room and rest, if that's all right with you. Is there anything else you need?" "That's just fine, Nellie. Thank you for everything. I'll see you in the morning." Granny took a cup of coffee into the parlor. The kids had gathered around the Christmas tree and were rearranging the gifts. McDougal curled up nearby and was soon snoring. "Let's put the presents together by size with the tall ones in the back," Doug suggested. "It would be better to sort them by name so we can each have our own pile and not have to search through them in the morning," Alan said. "Why not make it pretty and put similar wrapping papers together?" asked Lizzy. The packages were consolidated, shuffled, and relocated because nobody agreed on the proper way to organize them. For the most part, the fussing was minimal, and they were having a good time. Alan picked up a gift that had his name on it and gave it a shake. "Dad, Alan is shaking the boxes again," Lizzy complained. "Stop shaking the presents, Alan. Some of them could break," Mr. Albright called out from the foyer. A few minutes later, Mr. Albright poked his head through the entrance and said, "You guys want to come check this out? It's not as amazing as Santa's workshop outside, but it's pretty cool." "What is it?" said Alan. "Come on, check it out." The grand staircase at the front of the house had ornate, hand-carved wooden railings. Twice a year, Granny hired someone to oil and polish the handrails and banisters. At the base of the railing was an elaborate pedestal with a marble top. On the pedestal was a bronze statue of a cherub. The cherub stood on one foot, with the other foot slightly lifted. Its right hand was clenched into a fist and pressed over its heart. Its left hand reached as high as possible and held a frosted glass ball. Back when Mr. McHale converted the chandelier, he had the pedestal wired and installed a light bulb inside the globe. It hadn't worked in 5 or 6 years, but Mr. Albright decided he might as well try to fix it so it could be part of the Christmas celebrations. "Neato!" cried Doug. "Dad, you fixed it!" "Mom, come look!" Lizzy shouted down the hall. Everyone gathered in front of the hall and admired the glowing glass ball. Granny gave Mr. Albright a hug. "Thank you, Oliver. I had forgotten how special it was." "My pleasure, Esther. It was easier than I thought, once I got inside." Pearline walked over and took Mr. Albright by both shoulders. He was worried that she was about to kiss him, but instead she said, "Ollie, you're a jack of all trades. Restoring this light has made my Christmas. I have so many memories of it from when I was a girl." The grandfather clock began to chime. It was 8 o'clock. 2 more hours. No, make that 3 more hours before bedtime. Mrs. Albright was a stickler for the children's schedules, but there was no reason not to let them stay up later on Christmas Eve. They were all pretty excited about getting the extra hour. "Look!" cried Alan, pointing to the front window. "It's snowing!" They all went to look outside. The big flakes were just starting to fall, and a little dusting of snow began to cover the driveway and lawn. "I'm so excited!" cried Lizzy. "We're going to have a white Christmas." "You were right, Dad," exclaimed Doug. Mr. Albright chuckled. "Wow, how often can I expect to hear that from a 15-year-old?" They both laughed. "The snow is falling, and that's my cue," said Pearline. "I better get going. It's been wonderful to see you all. Maybe we can get together later this week, Maggie." "Let's do. I can come by the cut and curl. Let me walk you to the door." Lizzy announced that she was going to the attic to play. "Do you want to come with me?" she asked Alan. "Nah, I'm going to finish figuring out what all these presents are." Lizzy didn't mind playing in the attic alone. It gave her the opportunity to make all of the decisions without fuss or compromise. "Okay, I'll see you later," and she headed up the stairs. "You might just hear reindeer prancing on the roof tonight," Mr. Albright called out. Lizzy laughed. "Oh, I hope so," she called back. The short flight of stairs leading to the attic was in between her bedroom and the room Doug and Alan shared. The boys would often hide behind the attic door and jump out, scaring Lizzy as she passed by. But it wasn't the boys who startled her this time. "McDoo, you scared me." McDougal had followed Lizzy and dashed up the attic stairs ahead of her. She had forgotten how quiet he could be. "You want to join me? You want to be in my play? Okay, I have the perfect part for you." Lizzy went into the attic and turned on the light. She was milling about inside the cedar closet, browsing through Granny's gowns, when she heard footsteps coming up the stairs. Miss Pearline Beasley has showed up in our story.
Oh, yeah. So there were characters in my grandmother's town just like that, like Pearline, that had either funny ways of talking or dressing or whatever. And of course, as kids, it was our duty to make fun of it. And so Pearline was actual real person that was my grandmother's friend, although we've described her as not, her physical traits are not this, but there was a Pearline.
That's funny. Well, I actually love Pearline, and I love how she talks with her Z's and so forth, and that she gets to be called Miss B because of it. And then she's got this last name and then a married name that both give her the B aspect. And she's got a beehive hairdo and owns the cut and curl. And I can just see that. I could remember back in the days when I would have to go to the beauty shop with my mom. And I can remember all the ladies sitting in those big chairs with those big hot dryers all top of their head. You know what I'm talking about? So, and here's another thing. My dad was a barber. When I was a kid, my dad was a barber. He owned a barber shop. So I got both worlds.
I ever knew that.
Yeah, I had to go to the beauty shop with my mom, but then I had to go to the barber shop with my dad. So I was in all sorts of, I had the slick back hairdo with the part and all of that good stuff. Yeah, absolutely. So
I never really went to the beauty parlor. In fact, I would go with my brothers to the barber shop, to get the bowl haircut, although it was better than a bowl haircut. But the same guy cut my dad's hair up until my dad passed away a few years ago. He had the same barber. It had to have been for 55 years. Crazy.
It is. And my dad was one of those. Somebody got my dad. They wanted to stay with him forever. My dad ended up becoming a transport truck driver, but the start of it was all barbershop. I'm going to switch to Ollie Albright goes and fixes the banister light.
Yeah, right. The orb.
And again, it makes me imagine this house, because we get the opulence of this grand staircase and the grandfather clock in the hall and the cherub and all of those things that are happening, and it's exciting for the family to finally see the light glowing again in the orb.
Yeah, I loved that description. I thought that was perfect.
We've had this foreshadowing of a winter storm that's approaching, and now the snow is falling, and everybody's like, okay, great, we're here, we're safe, and Pearline's going to skedoodle along and get back home ahead of the storm.
And we get to see Lizzie's love of the attic, because this is where she needs to escape to get away from her evil brothers who always irritate her. And so she gets to go to her favorite play place, the attic.
Yep. So she's kind of glad that the brother said no, and also she gets her companion McDougal is going to go up there with her.
Yeah.
So now we're getting to the title of the story, Lizzy Albright in the attic window, up in the attic, and I wonder what's going to happen when we come back for chapter 7.
Lucky number 7.